The goal of this two-part lecture is to explore the ways in which artists recontextualize culture in their work, be it the work of other artists, history, or popular culture, and the ways we, as artists, can do the same thing, making our practice richer, more complex, and deeply personal. Using iconographic imagery from unassuming sources is not a new concept. The pop art movement was built entirely on a foundation of household objects and foodstuffs, but I think it's very easy to see that as the past and not consider how, due in large part to the advent of the internet, our brains are constantly in dialogue with the randomness of our world, recontextualizing everything. It doesn't take very much for our brains to fill in the gaps between a series of images, building a deeper, interconnected meaning even when there is none. Even though the way most of us share our work is through the internet, we don't always see the images we produce as part of that same mimetic conversation. Memes carry with them a vast quantity of stored information. They are a language in the same way letters form words, which form sentences, and images in a sequence can tell a story. The amount of literacy necessary to parse through much of the internet nowadays is frankly shocking. Having seen all of The Sopranos isn't enough information to grasp what is being explained to me here. I also need to have seen that one image of Lady Gaga and Adam Driver used to promote the film House of Gucci, understand the basic game mechanics of Among Us, and to be completely honest, I don't fully understand this Captain Planet Pauly Gauthieri mashup, despite loving the show as a kid. Captain Planet, not The Sopranos.
Captain Planet, he's our hero, gonna take pollution down to zero.
What am I getting at here besides my love of the show The Sopranos? Just that the images we produce are read in the same way these memes are. The major difference being that they aren't always made with the same level of multi-layered intention. The first time I heard about philosopher Roland Barthes' concept of the image repertoire was from a talk with Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe, back in 2015. I'll play the clip and then talk about this idea further.
It was interesting because it was through comics and cartoons that I made so many of my friendships. It had so much to do with my relationship with my brother. And I could not sort of ignore the importance of that or really write it off, even though I knew I was supposed to. I knew it was supposed to be sort of ridiculous that these things are what mattered so much to me. When I heard about this concept of the image and the image repertoire, and this idea that when you fall in love with someone, you don't actually fall in love with them because you can't really know the entirety of a person, but you fall in love with a series of images that you associate with that person. I suddenly understood why I just felt this love for people who had made my favorite comics, because I was like, I have an image repertoire with you. I associate these images, which I love, and this experience of internalizing them, which I loved, with a person that I don't even know. And the really tricky part is that when I meet them, they have no image repertoire for me, so it's just sorry that I'm in love with you. But it's real. I mean, it's a real, really real thing. I think in terms of these image repertoires, I think the interesting thing, that's sort of for me and another person, but also between people, having something like a cartoon or a comic be a shared experience and actually slip into someone else's image repertoire with another person is also really interesting to me, because it becomes part of your love for that person and your love for yourself, which I think is as real and powerful as anything that could be in any image repertoire, and any part of anyone's love, which is why it's sort of really overwhelming, something like that this could be a part of somebody's experience. I think a lot about how when, if there's a certain point in your life when something is happening and something happens to be playing on the radio, and if it's a dissonant, if the song is trash, then it's such a shame, because you're oh, this really important thing is happening, and I hate this song. My life sucks. But if it's this really, something really beautiful, it becomes tied to this moment forever. So I would think about the show a little on the one hand, sort of, it could almost be anything, because it's going to be on in the background. It's going to be a part of someone's life just by being there. But if it's a beautiful song, if it's something that actually is meaningful, in the way that can be, that can really change sort of a moment in time if there's something playing in the background that is beautiful.
Like Rebecca said, image repertoire is the idea that it's impossible to fully know another person. So when we fall in love, what we actually fall in love with is a series of images connected to that person. In the interview, Ryan Sands mentions Rebecca Sugar's comic, Don't Cry for Me, I'm Already Dead, in which the bond between two men, formed entirely on Simpsons quotes, continues even after one of them suffers a traumatic brain injury. They love one another, and they love The Simpsons, which, in many ways, is the same thing. Rebecca Sugar's show, Steven Universe, is an excellent example of image repertoire being used boldly. There are several lists online where fans have compiled every reference the Steven Cruniverse, as they are often referred to, have ever put into the show for those that want to take a closer look into the beloved series. Why I think these references are so satisfying is they reward a closer look, often not hitting you over the head with how obvious they are, allowing you to then seek out those references on your own. I mean, what other children's animated television show references Victor Victoria, a movie where Julie Andrews, struggling to find work as a singer, is forced to begin performing as a female impersonator?
I won't give in. Even though I know.
In that same interview from earlier, Rebecca talks about the importance of diverse points of view while working on a show.
I want to ask you, there's a lot of characters who are depicting diversity in many different ways on the show. How important is it to have actual diverse people behind the show, either in the cast or on the crew? Is that important as well?
It's hugely important. And I think not even, I know you're speaking specifically racially, but also just I think the diversity of experience in general is so important, because that's how all interesting things happen, like creatively, like if you have, that's like, what is American culture? What is anything? You have to have, like, if you bring people together, I think also on the team, like, we're coming from radically different places, in terms of what we like about cartoons, and like trying to find not just a middle ground between what we all like, but actually preserving the things that we all like, and having them coexist in the show, so that we can have like Patti LuPone and Tom Sharpling like in the same show. Dee Dee is coming from being in Miss Saigon. Michaela was coming from being on Barney. That's also, but part of what's super important to me is that we're not all, we didn't all start doing this for the same reasons, but I'm interested in everyone's reasons, and I get to learn a lot about people who want things for different reasons than I do.
That's fascinating.
A breath of information makes everything better. What is fascinating to me about this concept is Roland Barthes, having died in 1980, couldn't have begun to comprehend how the internet has so fundamentally changed the way everything is processed. Image repertoire is such a romantic idea, tied to a time when our access to information was much more limited and regional, and yet now, on even the best day, the internet can feel like trying to drink directly from a fire hose. The people who follow our work online often have a rough idea of who we are, know of other things we've made, and what our work is positioned against within our own communities and cultural sphere. But anyone who's ever made anything that became a little too popular online understands the stress of being inundated with comments from people who have no real idea who you are and suddenly have a lot of opinions about what it is we should or should not be making. Because the internet is often seen as a neutral space, it can easily strip images of meaning when they drift off beyond our reach, despite the fun that can sometimes give us. And in turn, meaning is then reapplied, often by people desperate to make sense of the daily churn. I've been obsessed with a series of articles about ex-Prime Minister Theresa May's choice to wear a Frida Kahlo bracelet, and how, despite the best efforts of everyone invested in the story, couldn't find a single reason why she would do such a thing, knowing May's open opposition to many of the things Kahlo stood for, as a communist invested in an indigenous renaissance in Mexico after centuries of colonial oppression. Most likely May went to her show at the Tate and bought a souvenir, but looking at these images, one can't help but wonder, why am I even seeing this? If it doesn't mean anything, why the articles? If we scream loud enough into the void, will the void start to make sense?
Yeah. Public sector working together. Why we will never...
The work of Kahlo being printed on a bracelet is a prime example of how time morphs meaning, and, in my opinion, ever more reason to make our intentions clear in the work we produce. Though I'm sure it's a blessing we are not present for how our state will one day choose to handle our work after we die, it is encouraging that Kahlo's work still speaks clearly enough to render Theresa May's choice of accessory a little foolish. Kahlo's work then and now stands for something, referencing the history of her native country, the fact her father was of German descent, and her not-so-subtle feelings about the United States. Homework Part 1. Question 1. Write at least 4 sentences about the first piece of media you remember loving. This could be a movie, a book, a television show. What about this formative experience do you remember loving the most? What sense memories do you have tied to this place? Maybe someone read it to you, or you learned about it at a particular place you loved going to. For me, it would be this promotional VHS tape I received in the mail one day after school in the 5th grade about Pokemon.
You've been selected to receive the sneak peek about a phenomenon called Pokemon, a hit TV show, a Game Boy game, and loads of other cool things that are about to take America by storm!
It all starts with the TV show September 7th. My nephew, Ash, he just turned 10, is the show's star. His dream is to become a Pokemon master. This is no easy task. First of all, Ash has to capture all of these little Pokemon things.
The whole experience, coming home from school, finding the tape about a soon-to-be global phenomenon I had never heard of before, is seared entirely in my brain. Question 2. What was the last piece of media you remember loving deeply? A recent book you read and just adored? A movie that you just can't stop thinking about? Write at least 4 sentences about why you love this inspirational thing, and include an image from this recent discovery on canvas to accompany your writing. If I was doing this project, my answer would be The Sopranos, naturally. Question 3. Finally, combine these 2 pieces of media into a single idea. Think about a plausible way you could mush these 2 separate things into a single story. What form would it take? Would it be a movie, a book, a graphic novel? What would you leave out from either to make your idea feel more cohesive? Write at least 4 sentences describing this concept and include a drawing to clarify what this could possibly look like. Spend about half an hour to an hour on this drawing. And lastly, as an example, I do a story about a mob family raising and trading rare animals, but as a video game. I imagine it as a kind of farm simulator, a la Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley, but about the illegal animal market. You would have neighbors who you would have to decide if you could trust or not, as you compete with them for the best prices, avoiding being busted by the authorities. Keep in mind, this doesn't have to be goofy. Make whichever idea feels right to you.
Each one is totally different from the other. And, are you ready for this? There are 150 of them, and you gotta catch them all.